Hello and welcome to Best for Women Live, the podcast. Joining me today is Alex Bertok, and I am so excited for this conversation today for two reasons. One, I have known Alex for a couple of years now, and his philosophy on being an accomplice is one that I absolutely love and want to share with you today. So we're going to be getting into some fabulous conversation. Super excited for him to join me. He'll be coming on in just a few moments. One of the things that's so valuable and one of the places of advocacy for me, as you know, is around supporting women and supporting communities that support women. So we created the network to be able to make sure that women are being connected with each other, that they're being connected to the resources that they need. And more importantly, we hear the word resources all the time. What does that mean? Well, it's people, it's programs. Those are the two main ones. And so it's being able to help. We're back. That was interesting. So let me see what I can do to invite him in. Give me one sec. There he is. Perfect. All right, my friend. And there he is.
There we go.
Perfect. Hello. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am so good. I am so glad to have you here with me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. I was just saying the thing that I'm really excited about of our conversation today is the importance of words and language and how they interact with us. So before we get into all of that good stuff, I wanted to start by saying welcome. And do you want to take a minute to just introduce yourself and who you are?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brooke. So I'm Alex Bertok. My pronouns are he, him. I want to wish everyone a wonderful Indigenous History Month and Pride Month as well, too. It's a special time to reflect, especially for myself. I am a settler to this wonderful country on this great land to which we are on celebrating. And for myself, I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ2 plus community and really had a great time in my professional career at BDC. That's where I got to meet the fabulous Brooke. And personally, I've always just been a human being that's been excited and empathetic to the world at large and wanting to see people that typically have not always been seen or heard themselves to have that voice and to have that opportunity to make that change and be powerful. So when I joined BDC and had the roles and opportunities that I had to hopefully make small changes, but mighty changes in the interest of not only just my community, but any community that is underserved and at large needing extra help, attention, care, and assistance, that has been a huge purpose of who I am as a human being the past 7 or 8 years since joining the organization. And again, I'm just a lucky human being that loves traveling. I have a wonderful partner that we've been together for over 8 years, recently engaged. So I'm very excited about the future, but know that there is a lot going on in the world at large. And so I'm happy to provide any context personally and professionally to make the world a better place for everyone.
Okay, that was like the best introductions, like so perfect, because everything you just described is how I know you. Right? So you and I met, gosh, can you believe it was 2017?
I know.
Like,
Oh,
all right, it feels like forever away. And I think the piece that is really beautiful for me when I first met you, it was through your advocacy. It was through your work. You were the one who introduced me to the CGLCC. You introduced me to so many beautiful communities that it's not that they were overlooked. It's that I just hadn't been exposed to them, right? And I think it's one of the challenges that we have is there's so many amazing groups, networks, local communities. And I think one of the challenges that I see, and I think you do as well, is that oftentimes it's the larger companies that have the budget to be seen, right? To get out, to be in a big presence. And so it's not that we're not necessarily like, it's not that I didn't want to be part of or join or know about. It's I'd never heard of them.
Totally. And that's the hardest part, right? Is knowing exactly which part of the ecosystem or network that speaks to you, and where you'll find your voice is nurtured and cared and looked after, especially when you're in the midst, when you're especially an entrepreneur compared to these large corporates, as you said, Brooke. So it can be quite daunting. And that's where that empathetic mindset is so important when going into these spaces, realizing that everyone's coming from a different background, both business and personal and professionally. So it's very important to be active listeners and also be present when you're understanding and walking into a space, because quite often, especially for underserved or minority entrepreneurs or people, there is an extra set of challenges when walking into a room that other people don't face. And that's a trouble often at times when growing and trying to advance your business, right?
100%. Now I'm going to pause there because I think you started to touch into it. So you can go on, I'll say LinkedIn, any platform, and you will find hundreds of articles on empathy, being empathetic, and what that means. So tell me, not from a dictionary perspective, but from your own perspective, Alex, what does being empathetic mean to you and why is it important?
So a great question. And I think I'll lean into why first and then the how,
Perfect.
because for me, empathetic is really about understanding the human being in front of you, looking beyond the transaction and your immediate need as a human being. So when you're talking to a new person in a networking context, for example, you're thinking, okay, how can I get Brooke to be a client of
Mm-hmm.
Alex's? And often at times when you box yourself into that mentality, you forget all of the wonderful little things that actually will get you to that end result. So you have to not, jump the gun in terms of going right to what seems natural, or you have to remember as well too to fight against those natural reactions or tendencies when walking into a conversation or a room, especially for business development. And that's where I find it so important to have that empathetic mindset, that shoulder, that ear, that listening, that active listening, those cues to really understand the other person that you're speaking with. Because I know how important it is when I walk into a conversation and I can have another person across from me understand me for who I am as a person beyond just the transactional need that brought us together at the conversation. Because we all need to make business. We all need to develop ourselves and find new avenues. But how can we do that authentically? That's what I think as well often. How can I do that authentically? So when I leave a conversation, I really just care about Brooke. It's about her business too and what she needs to get done as a business owner, say perhaps, but how can I connect with that person? Because I want them to feel safe in connecting with me. Because I know for myself, I, as a LGBTQ2 plus member of the community, have always found that sometimes rooms aren't designed or conversations weren't designed with me in mind. So how can I be a good person and advocate for other people so that they can have a conversation and an experience with Alex that is genuine to them and who they are as a person? And how can I honor their life experience and integrity within just a few minutes within meeting each other? And for me, that is, it's important because the soul of a person is what defines the opportunity and the passion and the project to which they're ascribed to. Because if you get down to that, the nucleus of who someone is, you learn so much more than just the task at hand, whether that's business development or a need or a conversation, but really understanding the person in front of you and how you can get to that and unlock each other's opportunities and the best parts of each other. And I think hopefully I sprinkled a little bit of the how within there, but it's really just being intentional and leading with the heart. For me, it's about understanding who the person is And really, and if you don't understand who the person is, finding out more, because more often than not, we are very similar people together, but brought along our own different experiences and life challenges and whatever happens our way that color the people that we are. And we're all beautiful pictures and paintings. And it's important to recognize and to celebrate the different strokes of genius, the different strokes of empathy, the different strokes of challenge that are within each other, because we're all a beautiful tapestry and together we're a great mosaic.
Okay, I just want to pause right there and say I'm so glad we're recording this. When I started off by saying that you had this like beautiful philosophy that I wanted to unpack together, like that's it right there. So first off, this is how I know you, what you're describing. And while I've not heard you explain it this way, I know this to be true and I know it to be you. I'm like actually like a little teary listening to this because of so many things. I want to point out three things that I heard you say. One of them is I'm reminded of a conversation that we kicked off on last week's podcast episode where my guest actually turned me down as a client, not because it was because she knew someone in her network who was a better fit. And it's because she took the time to listen to me and what my objectives were. She knew that I wasn't going to be an easy fit for what she had designed. Right? You talked about like the room being designed. Well, she had a program design and I wasn't going to slide easily into the program and feel comfortable. And she knew that. She knew that there would be a bristle along the way, but she knew someone else whose program was designed for me. And so she made that introduction. So it's not even about getting the transaction. I think, hopefully this highlights an example of why it's getting to know the person and their needs and their expectations, because you can serve them in many different ways.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I want to bring up is a friend of yours and mine, a woman named Monica James. She has always taught me that the best way and the way that she has always approached business development is with what she calls the 2 cups of tea. So yes, there might be a transaction, there might be a fit. Eventually we got to the conversation of, I don't think that we're going to do business together because my friend would better serve you. That's the transaction piece. But we took time to get to know each other. And it's that 2 cups of tea, the idea of I want to learn about you. You want to learn about me. It's a two-way thing. It's not, Alex, I want you as a client and I'm going to try and manipulate the situation to make you feel like you need me or you need this thing that I have. No. I want to spend time with you, Alex, to get to know you and realize that you are just amazing and I'm enthusiastic and excited about what you're trying to achieve. I see and hear your vision and I might be part of your journey, but I think I've got tons of other people and programs in my toolkit, whatever you want to call it, that I can then also introduce you to. So it's a very openness, I think, that I hear in your wisdom as well.
Absolutely. It's curiosity about the other individual beyond just the quick transactional need, right? And that's such a great comment and to the 2 cups philosophy that Monica has, because that's how we have to, lead our conversations, especially for people, women, LGBTQ2 plus, Black, Indigenous, for minorities and underserved groups. Oftentimes, we need to be heard beyond just of who we are and what box we check for whatever reason, right? And when you get beyond that, you can really make a difference. And that, I believe, it's the art of almost karma in a sense, right? You put out good into the world, you lead with good intentions, those are going to receive back into you. And, a great comment about, getting people to the right fit, because especially as we get into Pride Month, especially at times, people will look at and say, hey, maybe Alex, you're the subject matter expert for this, or maybe you're a good fit for this. And that's where as well, too, we have to be good accomplices and allies to our other members of the community to say, I'm not the right fit for this conversation. Although I might fit some sort of box because of my community and background, I actually know someone that's LGBTQ2 plus that's a better fit for your event or for your company to work with. And by doing so, you're continuing that circle of trust and folks that will come back to you in spades, and a community that will come back to you in spades because you invested that intentional, caring, and people first mentality that goes beyond just your own intrinsic needs for survival, whether that be sales, business development, etc.
100% agree, right? It stopped being sort of selfish with your own agenda and just looking, how do I contribute?
Yeah, exactly. Where can I just, pick up and help, because, I always say often that, it takes a village. They say it takes a village to raise a baby. It takes a village to raise, start a strong, successful
Yeah.
business or whatever avenue or organization you're part of. So, you have to be humble and knowing that we don't have all the keys ourselves. And there's so much wisdom in leaning into other folks to get us to where we need to be.
Oh, I'm seeing a round of applause in the comments on that. 100%, Joanne. I totally agree. And I think, Alex, one of the things that you've mentioned in terms of your support for community, but also thinking about what is it that brings you a sense of authentic. You talked about the word allyship. You talked about the word accomplice. And we sort of started off saying, words actually do matter because they have meaning and they have intention. And we hear about allyship often, but you actually talk about being an accomplice. And so I was wondering if you can dig in a little bit more into what that actually means and why would someone want to be an accomplice? Because normally tends to be something you hear about when you're thinking of like bank heist.
Yes,
Right?
yes, exactly. That's so funny. And it's, what, it's such a great, I feel like, topic of importance right now, especially when looking at, all of our communities and diverse community at large. We need more accomplices. And you know what? It's not just for bank heists, and it's funny because whenever you look into the methodology, the first thing you'll see is that within the legal context of thinking of an accomplice, you think of committing a crime, someone that's attached to it. And when we ascribe that thought leadership to diversity and inclusion and equity, it really lends itself to that idea of kind of, being that accomplice, when you think of it almost like from the criminal part of it to the actual, community service part of it, it lends itself in almost a similar context by meaning we're not just attending spaces. I'm not Alex Bertok that is just on paper attending events and, passionate about, women and passionate about Indigenous women and Black women and LGBTQ2 plus two spirited people. It's more than that. It's it's leaning into the conversation further and saying, what can I do to break down barriers and put myself at times in jeopardy because I need to use my privilege to extend to other communities that don't have that privilege, that don't have that voice. To be that person inside rooms advocating for other people to make change when they're not at that table and questioning why those folks are not at that table. So it might make yourself sometimes put yourself in a more uncomfortable situation, but that's the important work of, I think, the evolution of being an ally to different communities, and especially within the diversity, equity, inclusion frame point, it's really about doing the acts of service that go beyond just showing up for others, but actually advocating for others and putting your own safety at risk because you want to help other people have the same access that you do. So for myself, being an accomplice is super important. And it's also important to note, the juxtaposition between an accomplice and an ally, and then also the savior mentality. So making sure as well, too, that when I'm doing advocacy work for other communities, that I'm not doing it out of a result of expecting praise or expecting, a pat on the back for it. I do it because it's the right thing. And I do it hopefully without any notice, because if you're doing the right thing for those communities, it should be within small to large actions every day being an accomplice.
That was sharp. That was a sharp answer. And I say that because you talk about safety, and safety can mean many things, right? Safety can be reputational risk. It can be your own psychological safety. It can be your own physical safety. I think of rallies and protests and places where you may actually have physical violence put upon you. I think of stories that I've heard, and there's one in particular that still sticks with me of a very senior leader who talked about how, she was going to a pride parade and really excited and, had her shirt on and was spat on in the street. And, and sort of from that perspective, it's like, okay, well, I had sympathy because I had experience of myself. And I share this story because she didn't finish the story. She didn't get the point of her own story. She took the shirt off, right? At the end of the day. She took the shirt off at the end of the day. So yes, she was uncomfortable for the day. And yes, she had a very negative experience that happens sometimes because the world is still not full of people who have empathy and understanding. And yet she didn't get to the end of the story where she named of herself, but in my own privilege, I took the shirt off.
Yeah.
Right.
And how powerful that is, right?
Yeah. And that's, for me, that's the definition of privilege.
Yeah, exactly. We can, and that's so important you say that, Brooke, because, that's part of being the accomplice, right? Is knowing and especially being, a Caucasian male, that white privilege at times, right? Where I can be empathetic, especially, to, my partner who is not white, but I don't have that lived experience. And no matter what I do to empathize better, I need to know that it's beyond just my own responsibility, my own lived experience. So what can I do to further understand those communities, those people, and make a change, but also recognizing that I am a white male, say at times, but what's my power as a white male? Because I'm accepted into spaces that perhaps other communities or women or gender diversity might not be. And so when we're in those spaces, what are we doing to advocate for the people that don't have those voices? And doing so in a way that's not giving myself a pat on the back, but really, trying to take the shirt off my back to help another person and what we can.
And yes, and I say even then to create and change within the place where you are included and welcomed, to try and shift that culture of whatever situation that is so that others are included and feel welcome, right? It's that sense of welcome and belonging.
Absolutely. It's what it's all about, right? We want to feel like we are valued people of society. We want to feel our full selves. We want to be able to bring our full selves. We want to live in a society one day where the color of our skin or the gender we are or the expression of our gender that we are, of our sexuality or our religious background, cultural background is celebrated, and we can find a place that is safe and equitable for those people in society, rather than trying to make a fit into a box where maybe the box is not a box. Maybe it's maybe it's a sphere. Maybe it's something else. We have to change our definitions of what is status quo and constantly look back and see our progress and not be content with our progress. Because I even look at the LGBTQ2 plus community, and we can see where there's over 500 pieces of active legislation right now in the United States against our community. And this is after so many years of progress and, within the community. And often sometimes I'll tell my friends, our community, I'm like, we are in a society where 7 years ago, we had our very first transgender person on the cover of Time magazine. And the fact that debate or that presence for that person is so much more of an issue it is in a context today than it was 7 years ago, shows that our work is never done in what we do, and that we constantly have to work better, and especially in today's context, work twice as hard to make sure that we're giving space and giving that safety, whether it's, like you said, Brooke, physical safety, emotional safety, financial safety, how important financial safety is, and giving opportunities to people to have their voice heard and to celebrate and understand where they come from, because every opinion is valued and understood.
Okay, there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. I want to shift our conversation to one of celebration, because this is a time of celebration for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? So tell me a little bit about, well, actually, I'm not even going to ask you. I'm going to leave it there. Tell me a bit about the celebration of Pride Month and what it means to you.
So Pride Month is it's like I said, being into it's a little bit more somber this year because of everything that's been going on with our community. But I always say that's even more so the reason for us to celebrate who we are as people, as a community, because we are not perfect within a community either. There has been lots of, inward debates towards how we can better support our two-spirited, non-binary, and trans folks. And for those siblings within our community, it is a time of highlighted peril, especially depending on where you are geographically. So I want to lean into it knowing that it's a bit muted for me this year, the celebration, because there's such a conflict between what's going on, but at the same time realizing that this is never a point to stop celebrating, however, as well to who you are, because if we look at the progress of where we're going, we are still so much further ahead with the advocacy, with the hard work. And so that should never be forgotten. So I, for myself, want to make sure I spend the month celebrating the love I have with my partner, celebrating the community around me, celebrating my family and my allies that are around me, because I have to take a moment and sit in my own privilege and realize how fortunate I am to have a family and friends that love and support me and my partner for who we are and for the work and contributions we have. So I think it's about everyone for me this Pride Month, because especially looking back and seeing where we are as a society, and in great regards that also as well to being reflective with, unfortunately, some of the sad things that are going on politically with our community, that it's important that we don't take our foot off the gas and we really just take time, especially with me, I have to remind myself to be mentally present and also take care of myself mentally, because these are not fun, easy times. So celebration has to be a key of that. And for any of my allies and accomplices, that's a moment of celebration too. And if you're perhaps just an ally, maybe as you're celebrating a few things this month, you can think about things that you can do to be more of an accomplice, where it's not just a celebration, but also the work too.
Okay, I want to pick up on two things. First, I want to thank you for being so open, right? For sharing with us live and publicly what this does mean for you. And I think you touched on such an important part, because at Best for Women, yes, we talk about business development, but we also talk about our health, because those two things go hand in hand. And advocacy work is not just about business development, it's about changing the world. And it's almost, in some ways, this is not the weight of the world on your shoulders. This is carrying the boulder uphill while other rocks are being pelted at you. Like,
Yeah,
this is like,
totally.
just right. It's an incredible amount of work, and there's resistance. And as much as we don't want it to be there, and we don't necessarily always understand how it could be there, we are truly changing hearts and minds through this work. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Well, listen, it's because of allies and accomplices like you and together as a community that make our work a little bit easier day by day, right? Hopefully, and with what we do, there will be less rocks pelted our way as we're moving those boulders. And eventually we'll have other people that will help us lift those boulders, so that the pain is not always on one person and always on your own shoulders.
Right. And I think you talked about like the idea of community, the village. And I think that has a really important part in mental health, right? Mental health is part of our safety. And so for the people doing the work, it is exhausting, right? So I also honor and value the fact that you're coming here to educate today, right? Which is
Yeah,
a labor of love in and of itself.
absolutely.
So thank you for
Listen,
that.
we're all having to pull within ourselves, right? To put ourselves out there. And that's what's so important, because it is so easy with the challenges and tribulations that we face every day just to give up, to be hardened by it. Sometimes, I sometimes almost think of them like, I just need to lean into being more of a, cis, white male who just doesn't care and just can just not have, the care, the worries and the challenges that I have to face. But, I wouldn't want to be any other way than who I am. And even though it can be exhausting at times, it's so rewarding because we have like-minded people within our networks and community. And that's what's so important, is having people like you, Brooke, to help showcase the different folks that make our world amazing, that provide something unique. And especially for women, having that, circle of trust, because again, it is tough because, women are expected to be everything, and the weight of the weight of the world on your shoulders is never enough, right? And that's why we have to always continue to show up for each other, because we know the battles and the challenges we face aren't easy. And that when you're smiling with another woman entrepreneur or diverse entrepreneur and having a conversation, that there has been so much pain and so much adversity that has gone into that has made them get to that place. And so leading with that empathetic ear, that empathetic heart, being kind to yourself constantly is so fundamental.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. I agree with all of that, Alex. And I think you've also really described one of the reasons why showing up authentically is something that is not everyone chooses to do or feels that they can do, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about whether it's a work context, a networking event, right, for owners, for leaders, there's many times when there's parts of ourselves that we protect by hiding,
Yeah.
or we protect by not enabling that part of ourselves within a certain context because we maybe don't have the energy. Maybe we know that the safety is too great, right? There's many reasons. And yet it takes so much mental energy to divide ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? It's exhausting to divide yourself.
Yeah. You're always having to second guess yourself, right? Am I being too empathetic? Am I leaning too far into the conversation? Am I perhaps needing to be a bit stronger or less, indicative of my emotions? Should I be less emotional? These are all questions that we sometimes have to ask within ourselves, right? Because the systems and the environments in which we're built into typically don't provide that intrinsically. And so that's where it's hard for us, because you question whether this is the right point of thought, and I say, to hell with it. It is the right way of thinking, because being a human first approach is so fundamental, especially in today's day and age. And I'll remember when a great expert from Michelle Obama's new book, talking about how the struggles that she faced as a Black woman in a law firm, and how she found that she couldn't find allies within the other Black women because everyone was having to not bring them full selves to work. People were not bringing their full opportunities, their full, they're not telling people at work about their family, etc., because they don't want to be viewed as an unprofessional person, having to work twice as hard to get half as less mentality. And it's tough, right? Especially for myself, I often doubt as well, how much do I present of myself in a conversation? What is appropriate? What is not appropriate? And I think that's where, again, when we're in communities and safe spaces where we're dealing with other diverse folks, I think it's important to be your full authentic self and to question why sometimes we're not bringing our full authentic self, and to be radical and go against that gut feeling that says I need to hold back because that doesn't bring business opportunity. That will make myself not be seen as a serious business leader. That will not be seen as this. By taking those perceptions away and giving power into the voice of empathy and who you are deep down to the core.
And I'll add to that, not just in spaces of like physically, mentally like-minded people, but also a room full of allies and accomplices, because oftentimes they may not look like us, sound like us, think like us, right? And that's part of why I know since the time that I met you, you and I instantly connected. I remember being at a conference together and then coming home on the train and being like, I know that voice. Are they like, and
Yeah.
the right? And the thing that I love so much is that you are consistently you. Every conversation we have, every time that we have a chance to get together and hear you speak, you are always consistently yourself.
Thank you, Brooke. And so are you. That's why we connected, right? That's
Oh,
why we're two peas in a pod, because we're people that, despite what society might say or the current challenges we face, we will always bring our full selves to work so that we can be examples for people that unfortunately can't be their full selves to work. And for people that might not see an empathetic women leader in you, Brooke, or might not see an empathetic LGBT male in myself, that hopefully we can be that safe space for other people that might not see themselves within an organization or a space that identifies with their personality and their values. And that's what, hopefully we work hard to do, right? So that we can find more like-minded people to bring us all together.
oh, 100% agree. 100% agree. Can you share with us any examples of how someone could be an accomplice? Because you talk about allyship, right? Which is the empathy, which is the could be the I'll say the more quiet works that people will do. It's liking and sharing a post. It could be like there's a lot of small things that we can do where we may not be really seen, right? You're not putting yourself at risk of any kind. But to be an accomplice, do you have any examples that come to mind of what it actually looks like to be an accomplice?
Totally. And I'll hopefully give a couple examples from small to large. So
Perfect.
small example can be as simple as when you're having a dinner table conversation with your family, extended family, and you hear something that doesn't sit right with you, that for example, might be, say, speaking on a community that's not represented at the table, that you're giving that point of view to say, hey, Uncle Bob, that is a wrong point of view. Listen, this is what the right, point of view is for this community, et cetera, et cetera. So taking your teachings, because a lot of times allies, we go to events, we understand, but you know what? It's accomplices is really putting it into practice what being an ally is about. So it's saying when you're hearing about, hearing the use of homophobic language or non-inclusive language, saying, hey, that's not the correct way of thinking. That is taking in, say, a small work environment, a microaggression, and correcting it. That's saying when we're hearing, for example, maybe perhaps we're discussing a leader and the automatic assumption perhaps might be that they are a white male, and taking that assumption out and calling people out on that. That's how you can be an accomplice from just a small, tiny action, is just using your voice, unfortunately, to sometimes make people feel uncomfortable, because that's where the thought changes, or people can actually question themselves by not being enforced in spaces of a non-proper opinion. So I always make sure that it's when the people that you're advocating for aren't in the room that you're advocating for them. So from a small example of just correcting someone's misinterpretation or, age stereotype, etc., by correcting that. And to be an accomplice in a larger sense, that's actually taking the actions to put your own self, say, perhaps at jeopardy to help another community. So, for example, in the work perhaps I do more so every day, that's taking the time to say, hey, what we're doing right now, perhaps from a business angle, isn't seeming like it's inclusive of Black women, for example. And that's me trying to advocate and put myself on the line for a community that's not mine. And that's what's so important, because Alex isn't just Alex without the LGBTQ2 plus. Alex is Alex for everyone. And that is Black women, Indigenous, you know, immigrants, it's everything. And so that's why, from, a more important standpoint and point of view, that's putting yourself at jeopardy at times to say, listen, the status quo here for me would not be saying something in a work meeting and just going along with how everything is being said. But maybe perhaps when you, at whatever job you're working at, or within your business, or when you're working with a supplier, questioning and saying, what is your supplier diversity strategy? How many clients do you have that are diverse? What is your procurement strategy to work with more diverse businesses? It's about making sure that when you're an accomplice, that you're actually taking actions that perhaps might not be in the best interest for you, but are in the best interest of the community. So at times it means maybe I might perhaps lose a client by having this question of reasoning, but will I be a better person and have more integrity by asking those questions? Because if, say, you're asking, say, of a company what their diverse supply chain is and holding them accountable to it, it might not lead to perhaps a business opportunity to you because you had to risk yourself in order to get there. But that employer or that company in the future will now be cognizant of people that have said that and challenge them and push them. We need people that are going to be doing that and being actors for change. If you're working in a legal profession, calling out biases, perhaps in different contexts of the law, looking at where there could be gaps that put others at a disadvantage and calling that out. It's about really making sure that you're checking for harmful behavior that you see and not being complicit with it, by being active in the part of voicing for change. And oftentimes, especially with a lot of folks in the client diversity or diversity space, we have to always be advocates for that change and really be intentional and forceful and put our foot down when something doesn't align with us. And we need to do better jobs of, especially myself sometimes, of being less of an empathetic person at times, and sometimes putting my foot down to say, this is racist, this is misogynistic, this is anti-woman, this is anti-LGBT. We have to, one of the quotes that I've read recently or thoughts is that if I'm going to feel uncomfortable, everyone's going to feel uncomfortable. And we need to lean into that a little bit more because we need to be better advocates for everyone across the board. So I hope I answered your question, Brooke, but it really can be any action that is really disrupting the change and status quo of the groups that we're in.
Oh, yes. And I'm seeing hearts trail up. Yes to all those examples, and I love it. It's saying things out loud because and whether we're calling someone out, because sometimes like naming it for shock, right, to make them stop and reflect is the right action, and other times it's calling them in. Okay, well, I wholeheartedly disagree with you, but tell me why you would say that. What is it that makes you think that would be correct, right? And so bringing them into the conversation as well, right? And there's different ways that we can approach that depending on the relationship that we have with that person. So I love these examples, and I love that the number one thing that I keep hearing is being bold by saying it out loud.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And it's tough. It's really tough. It does make you uncomfortable, which then in turn makes everybody uncomfortable around you.
Exactly. No one loves to be uncomfortable, but listen, we have to do it sometimes. And that's why it makes it easier when we have people and shoulders to lean on within our community to be able to bounce back for our own mental health in moments where we have to unfortunately make ourselves uncomfortable and be brazen, be bold, be radical, because we don't have time to waste, especially in 2023. There's a lot of implications coming our way from every diverse community. From we see what's going on with women and diverse groups and LGBTQ2+. It is not an easy time for us, so we have to continue to be bold and push forward together so that we can continue to have celebrations like Pride Month, because we can't take our foot off.
Oh, 100%. And I'll add to that as our final thoughts, being able to lean in and hold the hand of those around you. So whether it's leaning in, I think we're about to lose Alex, whether it's leaning in to be able to have those supports around you, or leaning in to make sure that you've got people who are there to help you debrief. So I love that. I'm seeing a bit of a spinning circle. I'm hoping it's not me, but Alex, if you are hearing this and when you connect back in, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Best for Women. This conversation has meandered all over. We talked about what it means to be an ally, what it means to be an accomplice, but we also talked about really important things like celebrating the work that we do. And oftentimes that work is being bold and putting ourselves at risk. So thank you to everyone who joined today.